They are the planes that won wars. Proud veterans of the days when heroes fought in the skies.
You don't fly it, you actually strap it on, and then you are one with the aeroplane.
In hangars and workshops across Britain, engineers and enthusiasts are fighting a desperate duel against corrosion.
It's only glued on, I'm sure it'll be all right.
And the clock.
I'll be pretty gutted if we don't make it.
Their mission? To return historic military aircraft to the skies.
The hardest thing is finding the parts.
From Falklands vets to Cold War jets.
As a little lad, you go, Mum, can I have an Airfix kit? Now it's time to play, isn't it?
But it can be an unpredictable business.
We filled it up and all those seals decided to let go a bit.
We need a plan B. Not sure if we've got one.
And dangerous.
It can turn nasty quickly.
Contact. You're taking off thinking if the engine stops, where are you going to land? I mean, I've had 3 engine failures.
It takes serious money.
You need a cool £3 to £6 million to get a good Spitfire.
And total dedication.
Minus 28. Some of the tools are freezing up.
15 minutes of holding a screwdriver, you can't feel your fingers.
This time on Warbird Workshop, mission almost impossible.
I just thought we're never going to get this thing flying.
The team ordered to rebuild a Spitfire wrecked in a crash.
One of the wings had been ripped off and the spars had broken.
On the airfield that was once the front line in the Battle of Britain.
You are literally walking on the same ground that those young pilots would have walked on in the 1940s. It's a real privilege.
Golf Alpha Victor, begins information Delta QNH 10.
Biggin Hill Airport, Kent.
Start approved. Expect the Brookmans Park 2 departure from runway 03.
Today,
ready for departure.
It's home to the helicopters and business jets of London's elite. But in a corner of the airfield, a unique aviation company is fighting to put vintage warplanes back in the air. And this is their latest target. Two years ago, Spitfire MJ 772, veteran of 50 wartime combat missions, was wrecked in a crash in a Kentish field. It was all but destroyed. Chief Engineer Franco Tambassia remembers the day well.
Because I was one of the guys who went to the field where it crashed. I just thought we're never going to get this thing flying.
The plane has been bought by the Heritage Hangar, a company which owns and operates a small squadron of vintage Spitfires flying paying passengers. Former Royal pilot Richard Verrill is a senior manager, and he knows the rebuild is a massive task.
In any forced landing off-airfield situation, we would land with the undercarriage retracted, and that means that you're landing actually on a very flat surface. Of course, the propeller strikes the ground because you're not on the undercarriage.
One of the wings had been ripped off, all the panels had torn and the spars had broken. So the first job, we were in the other hangar, stripped everything out of it, assessed damage on all the components.
Project manager Paul Ager and the company's full-time team of engineers have taken 18 months to reach this, the most critical phase in the rebuild. They've been set a 6-month deadline to get 772 back in the air.
Alex, he's an apprentice, but he's really picked it up well.
Eventually you're not going to have that knowledge there anymore, so it's nice that it probably got passed down.
Gary hasn't been with us that long. We've used his skills to do all the hydraulic pipes and the coolant pipes. Jack's been sort of engine fitting and he does a lot of the metal work with me. He's studied aeronautical engineering. Been offered the opportunity to work on jets, but I really enjoy working on Spitfires. It is a privilege to be working on them.
The project begins with the most serious damage.
One wing wasn't as bad as the other. The port wing was the one that got ripped off, but we were obviously going to re-spar both wings. A massive task, let's put it that way.
A wing spar is solid tubes that go through each wing, which is your main structure. Pretty critical part, yeah.
These are two brand new spars here, and you can see the structure of them. They're tube that's squared off, and they're all laid inside each other. And the benefit of that is if you have one tube that's cracked, it doesn't transfer to the next tube. The lift force from the whole wing is concentrated through a cross-sectional area of these two spars, and that is all that holds the wing on.
The added complexity is that few components are newly engineered.
The crack with this is that we're putting together quite an original aircraft, a lot of original parts. On the shelves there, all the original bits from this particular aircraft, which is nice to have.
They didn't have long to wait.
80 years ago, the Spitfire made history in the Battle of Britain. 20,000 were built. Less than 50 still fly, and even fewer have seen real combat, like 772. The thousands of components that make up a Spitfire were produced all over the UK as part of a cottage industry. Renovating or replacing them now is far from straightforward.
Although they were sort of jigged and made in a similar way, there is still variation. Although it's sort of the same part, you'll try and take that off of that one and the holes won't line up. Back when they were made in the war, they just wanted to get them built as quickly as possible.
The team are at a critical stage, fitting newly renovated flaps to the wings. Their rebuild is reliant on many re-engineered spare parts.
The left-hand flaps were quite badly damaged, so all the ribs in them were replaced.
The flaps are vital. They allow the pilot to reduce airspeed enough to safely touch down on the runway. They have to be aligned precisely.
Pretty critical. They need to deploy at the same angle. You have one down further than the other, your isometric roll. You're almost building the wing to the flap.
It flows, it sits nice and flat. What we've got is a tiny bit of droop there, and what we're doing is as we're riveting in it, we're putting a slight set in the ribs to actually pick that up.
It's a painstaking process. The ribs are adjusted by fractions of an inch until the perfect fit is achieved. The team are committed to making this Spitfire as near original as possible. But this presents a huge problem for our operations manager, Darren Trey.
I think the hardest thing is finding the parts. You can't just go and buy stock, so you need to either manufacture it or seek it out.
But if you know where to look, there's a surprising source of genuine components.
We call it new old stock because it is new, but it's, as the name suggests, it's old stock.
This box hasn't been opened since it left the factory in 1945.
So this one, as you can see on the front, is a Smith's RPM gauge, or as they call it, an engine speed indicator. So this is showing you the speed of the engine. And so I'll open it up now, and this is inside an RPM gauge. And this is as close to new as you're going to get, with the exception of being a bit dusty.
The market for spares has been inflated by enthusiasts scouring eBay for Spitfire parts. A rear-view mirror can sell for £1,000.
You can't fault people for it. Everyone wants a bit of Spitfire, but you've got all these serviceable parts that we then can't get hold of. Control columns are quite expensive. I mean, I've seen them go for 1,500 quid, so it's astronomical sometimes.
In 1940, the new Spitfire cost £10,000, equivalent to £500,000 today. But they can now change hands for £5 million.
It's not cheap. The value of a Spitfire is very variable because it depends on its mark, its history. MJ 772, like all two-seat Spitfires, started life as a single-seat Spitfire, so she had quite an illustrious history.
To find that it actually flew over Normandy on D-Day was something that was very, very special. After that, it was sort of chasing the Germans as they retreated, bomber escorts, so it's got a real varied history.
In 5 months, MJ 772 must be in the air.
Good morning, Fly Spitfire.
But as passengers begin booking trips in the new Warbird, the technical team face 3 major challenges. They must work out the puzzle of her damaged cooling system.
There isn't a set drawing for how the pipework should run.
Adjust her vital control cables and fit a new mighty Merlin.
Probably the most famous engine of all time.
Putting an historic Spitfire back in the skies means removing and replacing worn-out parts that have helped to write history. There's 5 months to go before war veteran MJ 772 is due to make its first flight, and its design is presenting the engineering team with its biggest challenge. The Spitfire was descended from seaplanes, the supermarine racers that competed in speed trials against the rest of the world's fastest for the Schneider Trophy in the 1930s.
Very high performance seaplanes, very, very well designed. Reginald Mitchell went on to develop the Spitfire based on the Schneider racers. Monocoque fuselage aluminium aeroplane, which is totally different to what had been going before.
And one of designer R.J. Mitchell's obsessions when he was turning seaplane into fighter was the least glamorous component on the plane. Without it, the Spitfire would have no structural rigidity. The tiny rivet is an unsung hero.
You can't really weld aluminium together, so riveting is the easiest way of permanently fixing 2 or multiple parts together.
In the course of the rebuild, they've had to replace thousands of 1940s rivets.
Once you get going, it's all exceptionally tedious.
So when Mitchell suggested most of the planes should have flush rivets as opposed to the quick-fix domed variety, there was opposition. But he had a point to prove.
I did experiment by putting split peas over flush rivets.
The result? A 20-knot difference in speed. If you're being chased by a Messerschmitt, it could be the difference between life and death.
Good morning, Fly Spitfire. Yeah, so we've got suits that you can wear and you'll get a brief before you go and fly.
Operating out of Biggin Hill is wonderful because when you walk outside the hangar, you are literally walking on the same ground that those young pilots would have walked on in the 1940s. I think taking the passengers here constantly reminds you of how special it is. You get to hear all these individual stories of what connects people with the Spitfire.
Today, Eve Mann from Surrey will fulfill a lifelong dream.
I've always been interested in speed, and I've raced, would you believe, a 2CV. Well, my husband died 6 years ago, and he was in the RAF, and he was a flying officer. And as he was leaving the RAF, he had a position taken up in university, and he was offered a position with the Spitfire, and he turned it down. He kicked himself forevermore. So I'm here today, actually, to do it for him. I'm just debating whether to ask the pilot to do a victory roll, actually.
Really great to see that exhaust coming out.
Yes. Golf Sierra Bravo, taxi by Alpha 4, the holding point, Foxtrot 1, runway 03. Alpha 4, Foxtrot 03, Alpha Sierra.
Let's go and have some fun.
There's the power set, the tail's up, keeping us straight with the rudder, and then just holding that pitch, waiting for about 85 miles an hour, which we've got. There we are, airborne, brakes go on, swap hands, undercarriage is travelling. There's the gear up, intercom back voice activated, and then we'll start to climb. Passing runway 03, also routing via 7X. All okay there, Eve?
That's fine, thanks a lot.
Great. Braking left in 3, 2, 1 now.
First stop for Eve, a visit to a familiar racetrack.
So what we'll do is we'll go around and have a quick look at Brands Hatch.
That's brilliant.
That bring back memories for you, Eve? Yep. I'll raise the nose gently back above the horizon, and then we'll roll left all the way round in that victory roll for you, okay?
Okay.
So it's all clear. And rolling left now. All okay, Eve?
Yep, fine, thank you.
Good.
A victory roll by a wartime pilot returning to base was a celebration of survival, and another enemy plane defeated.
Slightly right wing low to deal with the crosswind.
That was fantastic.
Well, I hope that lived up to your expectations, as I say, Eve.
More than so, actually.
Okay.
That was pretty damn good, actually. Glad I did the victory roll too. Peter would have been dead pleased. The only man who ever turned a Spitfire down.
Oh dear. What do you think he'd say if he could see you now?
I don't see why the bloody hell you've made it.
To keep their Spitfires in the air, the Heritage Hangars engineers must try to bring 21st century reliability to their 1940s power units. In each aircraft's nose is a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, a 27-litre technical marvel producing more than 1,000 horsepower and guzzling a gallon of high-octane petrol every minute.
To sit behind a Merlin when it's running, it's just a sheer joy. Probably the most famous engine of all time.
It is the beating heart of the Spitfire, and MJ 772 is about to receive a brand new reconditioned Merlin.
You've got the engine bearer, which itself is quite a complex bit of kit, and that takes an awful amount of restoration. I mean, it looks fairly straightforward, but then you count up the number of bolts and brackets and the angles that are involved in it. It's quite a complicated thing.
Obviously, you have to be careful. It's a lot of weight, 3/4 of a ton, so be careful lifting it in. Yeah, very expensive to get it overhauled as well.
It's worth about £150,000. The sooner it sits in the nose, the better.
Installing the engine, you pretty much lower it in, and to actually attach it in, it is just a number of bolts.
But to make the Merlin roar, the engineering team must replace the extensive network of piping that the Spitfire's designers created to dissipate the heat from the massive engine.
Yeah, for an airplane that's got a very slim wing, it was a very clever design.
MJ 772's wings are packed with copper piping.
Basically a complete system goes through the engine, gets hot, goes to the radiators, gets cooled, and then back up to the coolant tank, and then it just carries on the cycle.
It's a complex design with a fatal flaw when it comes to rebuilding it.
There isn't a set drawing for how the pipe work should run. It's just from point A to B.
It means there are almost as many pipe designs as there are Spitfires, and Gary Woodhouse has the job of figuring it out.
You've got your main water coolant, and this is your oil cooler. But obviously, under there is an array and a maze of pipe work. Not so much frustrating, but everything you put on, you've got to take it off to realign it, make small adjustments and put it back on, so it is a painstaking job.
Leaks are their biggest enemy, but undisturbed airflow into the radiators is critical.
You don't want to overheat these, and obviously on the ground you need to be able to keep them cool so they can taxi out to the runways.
During the war, some pilots were forced to bail out as their engines boiled and then seized in flight.
If you have an undercarriage that isn't up properly, that blocks the radiator, and the temperatures do come up quick, so yeah, they really do need to be kept cool, yeah.
The Spitfire was a quantum leap in technology at a time when biplanes were still considered high-tech. In 1940, Britain needed more of them, but the existing aircraft industry was struggling. The Supermarine factory in Southampton was bombed, killing 90 workers, and its parent company's production line in Castle Bromwich was beset by industrial action and technical problems.
I would say that what we do now is probably to a higher standard than what they did in the war, because we're not getting bombed and we're not time pressured to churn these out a couple of weeks. We're doing one every couple of years. When they're making them in wartime period, I mean, Spitfires weren't expected to last much more than a couple of weeks on the front. They were nearly a throwaway airplane.
For all its innovation, it was the brilliant simplicity of the Spitfire's control system that made it a world beater.
It's all cables, but it's such a smooth system.
This is 1940s fly-by-wire, literally. A series of cables directly linked to the control stick operates the elevators and ailerons.
There's a set amount of figures for the tension on all the controls. It's just a very, very smooth aeroplane. And if you sit on the ground with the aeroplane and you move the controls, they're very, very smooth. And it's like that in the air. You don't feel any excessive load on the controls when you're flying. It's different if you're diving the aeroplane. If you're doing a V&E dive, the ailerons get very heavy and very stiff, but still responsive.
Work on MJ772 is progressing well. The team are making fine adjustments to the propeller.
Very expensive. You could buy a nice house for that, couldn't you, Ruth?
And there are some big days ahead. A visit from a VIP, here to inspect their 2 years of work. Apprentice Alex takes the controls of a real Warbird.
Imagine sitting in your greenhouse in the garden in like a 90-mile-an-hour storm, and that's what this is like.
And a critical test for MJ772's new Merlin.
Yeah, quite nervous, yeah.
It's late December 2018, and MJ772 is nearing completion. It's been given a new paint job in honour of the upcoming 75th anniversary of D-Day.
Putting the invasion stripes on the aeroplane. This aircraft flew in Normandy in the war, so here we're putting them back on as they would have done with a roller and paintbrush.
The stripes were designed to prevent friendly fire, as Allied planes fought to dominate the skies over the invasion beaches.
Yeah, I think they used big brushes. They were just slapping it on as quick as they could, really. I think they'd done all the aircraft within a week. But yeah, they weren't as neat as that, but we tried to give it a rough edge to make it look genuine. You could spray all this and spend a lot of time masking out and spraying it, but it just doesn't look sort of as wartime, really.
20-year-old engineer Alex is having a morning off. He's had a pilot's license for 2 years and one day hopes to fly Spitfires. He's preparing for that by getting to grips with a 1943 Piper Cub, used for artillery spotting by the US Army over Normandy.
This is really, really basic. I use this quite a lot because this is the gateway into warbird flying, learning to coordinate your feet with your hands and making sure everything's moving in the right way together. Imagine sitting in your greenhouse in the garden in like a 90-mile-an-hour storm, and that's what this is like. It makes more sense in the summer. It's just nice to get up in the air and fly around, and you really do float around and you can see things from miles off, and they stay miles off because you're not going anywhere fast. This aircraft was actually used around Bastogne area in the Battle of the Bulge in 1944. So it's a piece of history, but a bit chilly afterwards, especially when you're in it about an hour or so.
One of the few remaining pilots who flew over the Allied advance is visiting the hangar. David Mitchell is 94. He once flew from Biggin Hill with 341 Squadron. MJ772 was his plane.
How you doing? I'm Alex. Do you want to come and look at your old airplane?
Yeah, sure.
Do you want a hand up or? Yeah.
Yeah, that's better.
Chairs a bit low, aren't they? There we go. Okay, yeah. She's moved on a bit since you were last here. Because you were back when we did we had a bit of Veterans Day, didn't we?
Yeah.
Which was quite a good bash, that, but yeah.
Yes, that was good.
Yeah, and got you to sign the door and everything. Yeah. So no, she's moved on quite a long way since then, and you can probably smell the paint in the air. We're just putting the invasion stripes on her now as well. Yeah, so it's quite a strong smell of paint. Lovely. So I apologise for that, but yeah.
Don't have to apologise.
So we'll take a left here and we'll head up this way.
Yeah, when we fly these aeroplanes, we are doing it in honour of the veterans. Very modest people. I've never heard anybody that's flash or very flamboyant about what they were doing. It was a job, and they just got on with it.
Yeah, here she is. As you can see, putting the invasion straps on her right now with the older paint rollers to make it look a bit more authentic.
It's hard to believe when you look at people. You wouldn't, if they didn't tell you, you wouldn't know on the street what they've done, and it must be amazing for them to see some of the aeroplanes that they've actually flown all that time ago. I don't suppose they'd ever imagine that it would still be around. Yes, it's really, really great.
It's very, very good.
We hope in the next couple of weeks or so we'll be running her, and then, depending on paperwork, not too long after that she'll be flying, so that'll be nice.
Yeah.
What would they like to fly?
Oh, a delightful aeroplane. I can't think of any other aeroplane that was nicer. I've loved the Hurricane before I'd ever flown one of these. After that, I didn't like it at all. They are lovely aeroplanes, but they do give a certain amount of trouble. You probably met some of them. But that aeroplane never gave any trouble. Not to me, anyway.
When the guys like David are speaking, it's always really interesting to listen to what they say, because the stories that they got, they all vary so differently, because everyone had a completely different experience.
David's squadron was attached to the Free French Air Force. He's being shown a recently discovered film of his unit's pilots, but the years have taken their toll.
I can't see a single face that I would recognise, 75 years ago. Some of them have matured. Ah, who's that?
David has recognised René Mouchot, a French ace.
He died when he was at Biggin Hill. Klosterman, is that him?
And Canadian Jack Charles.
This is the French squadron, and they ran out of Frenchmen, so they had 7 English pilots. We were stationed south of Nijmegen, and we were over German-held territory within 10 minutes. Contact with the enemy was most of the time in the air. We wouldn't be off the ground an hour, and we've done the job. We only had just under half the year to go before the war stopped, but we lost 4 of the 7 in that time. They died. Yeah.
I'll talk to you later. I'll give you a bell later.
David has been promised that when MJ 772 flies, he will be invited back. His old fighter is now nearing completion. MJ 772 was a single-seater when she went to war. Fitting out the rear cockpit is the last task. It's the only part of the plane that will not be authentic.
We're very fortunate here that we've got a lot of original spares. Everything is pretty much as it would have been in 1944 when it was manufactured.
Passenger trips can cost up to £5,000 if you opt for the full White Cliffs experience. But luxury seating isn't part of the deal.
I like a compressed paper type material, so quite hard, but yeah, not overly luxurious, no.
Safety is more the order of the day. Lives depend on all of the Spitfire's components being correctly installed. Parachutes come as standard, and the pre-flight drill includes instructions on how to bail out.
A bit of paintwork and then we're finally finished.
3 years after its crash, MJ 772 has now been fully restored, thanks to the skill and dedication of the team at Biggin Hill.
So what, you're going to do a first quick run, check everything.
But today, the most nerve-wracking time begins. Starting the reconditioned 27-litre Merlin engine for the first time.
No pressure, Gary.
It's a crucial test. With paying customers expected in a few weeks, a failure at this point would be bad for business. This plane must fly to justify the huge cost of the rebuild.
We're going to put it on the tie downs facing that way.
It's always a big moment. I mean, the guys do their thing, they check everything, but there's nothing like an actual engine start just to shake everything down. It's quite usual to find, small leaks, minor problems.
We've got some tie down points down here, some anchor points. So what we do is we'll line the back of the airplane up and we'll put a strap down so that when we run it, just in case we've got the back tied down so that it isn't going to nose over. There's always a chance that it could do that, so if we take all the precautions just in case, then better to be safe than sorry.
This plane is now worth around £4 million.
Obviously check that there is no leaks. Once the pressure builds up, then we can do a more high power run if everything goes to plan.
I suppose you're dealing with an unknown, really. I mean, we've put all new pipe work and everything on this aircraft, so we've got fuel lines and all the rest of it, and if there is a leak, that could always spark a fire or a short or something, so you just got to be a bit careful with all of that.
Engineer Paul will be in the cockpit.
Quite nervous. Fire extinguisher at the ready, but it's a massive sense of achievement. The person starting it after all them years, yeah, it's really good.
See ya.
The fuel pump is priming all 12 cylinders with high-octane petrol.
Max on in a sec. Fuel prime until it goes. Main thing is just keep an eye on the oil pressure to make sure the engine is okay.
About 110, which is spot on. About 1,000 on there. There we go.
Jack and Alex check for leaks. If there are any, it's vital they don't go unnoticed.
If you're losing water or coolant, the aeroplane will boil very quickly, and if it boils, probably 2 or 3 minutes and you'll seize the engine.
Make sure Jack and Alex are happy. All good? Oil should come up to about 30 to 40. Brad said keep under 110.
It's a textbook first engine start so far. Now, Paul must increase the power.
Coming up to 1500 now. Oil pressure's still good. Right, that's 1800.
But then, a failure. Luckily, it's just an inspection panel from the wing.
That'll do for now.
The Merlin has performed flawlessly.
Well, we do test runs and stuff, sometimes you get the odd bit like that, like throw a curveball at you, but it's all right. She sounds sweet. Pretty golden, really.
MJ 772 has passed its first major test, but the biggest challenge remains for the team. Putting this Spitfire into the air for the first time.
It's quite a big day. 2.5 years of hard work, so we're all pretty nervous.
There is always the potential that something could go wrong.
At the Heritage Hangar, the day for which the team has been waiting over 2.5 years.
At the end of a project, you get to see the final aircraft and you think, gosh, you know, hundreds of hours have gone into that.
All being well, MJ 772 will finally take to the skies again.
You're a little bit apprehensive because you think, oh, we've built this thing, and this is the first time it's flying. There is always the potential that something could go wrong. There could be an engine failure, which is out of our hands, and so, yeah, you're always a little bit apprehensive and nervous, but confident that it's all going to be okay.
The test pilot will be Pete Kinsey, one of only a handful of aviators alive to have flown all the great fighters of World War II. In the hangar, a Spitfire, its sister ship the Hurricane, and its enemy the Messerschmitt Me-109. Pete has few doubts about which was the best.
It's the Spitfire, and that's not just because it's a Spitfire, because of the name. It is just a very honest airplane. It doesn't throw any nasty surprises at you, and you feel as though it's on your side. The Hurricane, it's a fine airplane, but its performance isn't as good as the Spitfire. The view out of it isn't as good. Its handling isn't as pleasant. I mean, it has obviously a wonderful place in history, what it has achieved, but just from a pilot's point of view, it's not as nice an airplane as the Spitfire. And then we come on to the 109. I love to fly it, but I like to fly that for a different reason. That's because that's a challenge. Every time I walk up to it, I think, what are you going to do to me today? It's the only airplane I've ever flown, I think, where the takeoff is potentially more alarming than the landing. But if someone says, would you fly my Spitfire today, you know you're going to have a nice day out.
Or that's the hope, at least. First flights are not guaranteed to go well.
It's quite a big day. Obviously, a lot of nerves flying around. Obviously, it's the first flight of the aircraft, so we're all pretty nervous for that. But at the same time, it's a proving point because it's 2.5 years or so of hard work. So, quite excited to see it fly, really, and hopefully it all goes without a hitch.
Biggin approach afternoon, taxi out for 1 runway 21, QH 1024.
Full right rotor, flaps are up, operating in filtered air, mixtures forward, props forward, makes it on both. Front flaps are in auto, gear indication is correct, trimmers are set, all the instruments are set.
Runway 21, clear for takeoff, wind 280 degrees, 5 knots.
Full right there on, stopping the power up, feel the throttle fitting loose, so I'm just cranking a bit more, increasing the power now to 0 boost.
Test pilot is one of the world's riskiest jobs, and if something goes wrong below 2,000 feet, Pete will have no option but to attempt a dangerous crash landing.
It looks alright, doesn't it?
Have a look at the engine, door looks good. Power bank, 6 down the boot, 2650 RPM. Have a look at the engine gauges, yeah, they look good. Isn't quite right. I suppose you'd say that most of our concentration is going on the engine and propeller. That's where the problems usually arise. But it could be a handling thing. So as soon as we get over, I'm looking at the trim of the airplane. For example, would it fly hands off? If I let go of the controls, could I trim it to fly hands off? Or does it roll left, roll right? In fact, I'll let go of it now. A little bit of turbulence rocking the wings around, but apart from that, it would maintain level flight, so we're happy with that. The other thing we'd be checking on a test flight is all the systems in the airplane. It's got a pneumatic system for the flaps and the brakes, and it's got a hydraulic system for the gear. So we'd be timing how long it takes to go down and up, same with the flaps, making sure there aren't any trim changes.
On the tail, the frequency closed, recall me please on approach, 129.14.
MJ 772's reputation as a trouble-free aircraft continues. Testament to the skill of the engineers who rebuilt it, but also to the genius of its design.
almost perfect. I thought it was, but in the cruise, if you let go of it, if it's going to go one way, it'll always go right.
Okay.
But when you notice it, if you build a speed up, it gets progressively worse. So
Yeah.
300 miles an hour is definitely rolling right.
Okay, so we could go a little bit more.
Just a
on
little
that.
tweak,
Yeah.
that would sort
Okay.
it. Yeah.
What about the brakes?
The brakes are okay now.
Yeah.
They're
Not as good as
they're not the world's finest, but they're okay.
I think he was going to put 12-inch wheels on it eventually.
Right.
So.
And also, if you do move the stick fully forward, then you get decent braking. So if you're just at taxiing speed,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you wouldn't do it at high
No,
speed,
no.
but if you just got caught out in a crosswind on a taxi,
Yeah.
it's worth knowing that you can get a bit of extra braking.
It's always a relief for a man in your position.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yes, yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. It's not very many snags at all, so. Yeah.
It's just nice to see it fly and finally do something, because it's a bit fun. It don't belong on the ground, it belongs in the air. They're all here to do the same job, and it's quite cool to see the end product belting across the sky over there about 250 miles an hour. It's always nice to see.
It's a massive day. We've been working on this for many years. The engineers have put untold hours into it. The payback for them is immense. To actually see their part in this aircraft and see it flying again is amazing.
MJ 772 has passed the last crucial test before she's allowed to carry passengers. Her wartime pilot David was invited to see her fly, but sadly this is not possible.
Unfortunately, Dave Mitchell, who we had up and you would have seen before, unfortunately he's passed away, so I'm quite emotional really, but it was nice to be able to speak to him and ask the questions and get out the information out from him that we'd like to hear, and obviously his stories about flying the aircraft that is seen so often, so it's nice to get that from him really.
It's been an enjoyable time.
It's March, and David's Spitfire is finally signed off as airworthy once more, a lasting memorial to its former pilot and thousands like him.
The Spitfire assaults your senses in every way. It's partly about the noise, it's about the vibration, it's about the smell, it's about the history.
I regard it as a flying tribute. We must never ever forget the sacrifice that those guys did. Very young men jumped into these aircraft and went to war.
Yeah, when we fly these aeroplanes, we are doing it in honour of the veterans that have gone before us. I think they're with you all the time.
80 years after the Battle of Britain, the sound of Merlins is again echoing over the Kent coast as the Heritage Hangar's two veteran Spitfires patrol the white cliffs of Dover together.